4. Beowulf the Legend goes on the good Knizia pile. I generally like set collection games. They appeal to the collector in me. And Beowulf the Legend has multiple paths to victory to use that set collection towards, which is something I'm usually a fan of. This is a solid game, and I'll be happy to play it from time to time. I can see this working at many different player counts too, because much of the action is done simultaneously or nearly so. I don't think there are any Knizia games that garner frequent plays from me, so I won't be surprised if this one does get dusty in between plays though. I don't think there are any Knizia games that garner frequent plays from me, so I won't be surprised if this one gets dusty in between plays though. This week on Important Moments in Bryce Board Gaming History, the time I played my first Stefan Feld game. Stefan Feld is my favorite designer, so the memory of the first time I played one of his games is pretty significant for my history. That game just happened to be Trajan. I was in a transition period of deciding what games I wanted to investigate and consider buying. Instead of just blindly buying anything that was cheap enough, which is how I started out, I started putting a little more thought into it. One thing I did then, that I still do from time to time to this day, is go through the BGG Top 1000 and add items to my wish list based on theme, mechanics, and/or designer. I figure if a game has been critically well received enough to land on the BGG Top 1000, there's a good chance it has some kind of redeeming value to me, depending on if it meets the above criteria, of course. I've always been interested in the history of Rome, and seeing a game about Trajan caught my eye. Trajan was a successful emperor, and far from an obscure one from a historical point of view. But if your name isn't Augustus or Constantine, or one of the crazy ones like Caligula or Nero, you're probably not well known enough to the general public to warrant having a board game made about you. So seeing that there was indeed a game about Trajan was pretty cool. It didn't hurt that the cover for Trajan is very dramatic, very memorable in my reasoning to put the game on my wish list either. So I started to keep an eye out for a good deal on the game. The publishers of the game are not companies that are typically discounted here in the US, so a good deal was not readily apparent. Fortunately, the good folks who stock the hot deals forum at BGG are always on the lookout, and one day I got notification that Barnes & Noble was doing a 1 day half off a single item coupon at their online store. I knew just what I was going to get with mine. A few days later, Trajan arrived in the mail. It usually takes me at least a couple of weeks to punch and sort a game, read the rules, and get it to the table. And that's usually best case scenario. There are games on my unplayed shelf that have been sitting there for years. But Trajan was high priority, and reading the rules made me talk my wife into trying it out at the earliest opportunity. This game sounded really interesting, and I wanted to get to it right away. Oh man, the first time I used the Mancala to take an action, I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is really amazing. Over the years, I've really come to appreciate games that use a creative mechanism for players to take actions, and it's something that is my greatest priority in my own game designs. And this turned out to be Trajan's greatest strength, manipulating those little colored octagonal pillars to where I wanted them and pulling off desired action was so satisfying. It is so satisfying. The 6 mini-games and the point salad goodness that they create were just... Manipulating those little colored octagonal pillars to where I wanted them and pulling off desired action is so satisfying. The 6 mini-games and the point salad goodness that they create are just icing on the cake. So, let's stick with this. Yeah, okay. Manipulating those little colored octagonal pillars to where I wanted them and pulling off desired action was so satisfying. The 6 mini-games and the point salad goodness that they create were just icing on the cake. So, this is a Stefan Feld game, I thought at the time. The hype is real. And then I set off on tracking down and trying out his complete library. Trajan is still one of my and my wife's favorite Felds, though Castles of Burgundy and Bruges just barely surpass it in my mind. And earlier this year, in another memorable memory, I added the last game I needed of his for my collection, The Name of the Rose. I added the last game I needed of his to my collection, The Name of the Rose. Well, except for Merlin. I'm still waiting on a widespread retail release for that, which I'm still convinced is going to happen despite the weird track Queen has set that game on. Well, that will do it for episode 9. Thanks for joining me. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust podcast guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14, or email me at radagast14@CenturyLink.net, and join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. Alright, play me out, Tananda!